The Grand Assembly Hall was the largest structure ever built by any species in the known galaxy. It floated in the darkness of space like a metal flower, its petals made of glass and steel. Inside, thousands of delegates from hundreds of worlds gathered to discuss trade, war, and the future of civilization itself. Kim Do-yeon walked slowly through the main corridor, his hands clasped behind his back. He was not a tall man. He was not strong or fast or particularly impressive to look at. He wore a simple gray suit, and his hair was starting to turn white at the edges. To anyone watching, he looked like what he was, a former history professor who had somehow become humanity's voice among the stars. Behind him walked Park Yuna, his attach and translator. She was younger, sharper, and often frustrated by her ambassador's calm nature. Today was no different. "Ambassador," she said quietly, matching his slow pace, "the Valorian delegate has been spreading rumors again. He told the Crystalline Collective that humans are barely more intelligent than the animals we keep as pets." Kim Do-yeon smiled softly. "Is that so? Does that not bother you? Should it?" Park Yuna pressed her lips together. She had worked with the ambassador for 3 years now, and she still could not understand him. Any other diplomat would be furious. Any other species would demand an apology or challenge the Valorian to ritual combat. But Kim Do-yeon simply kept walking, as if they were discussing the weather. They entered the main chamber, and the noise hit them like a wave. Hundreds of species filled the curved seats that rose toward the distant ceiling. Some were giants, towering creatures of muscle and bone. Others were small, floating in special gravity fields or speaking through translator machines. The air smelled of 100 different atmospheres, filtered and mixed to keep everyone alive. Humanity's section was small. 50 years ago, when humans first made contact with the galaxy, they had been given the worst seats, far from the center, barely visible to the main stage. It was a message. Humans were new. Humans were weak. Humans did not matter. Kim Do-yeon took his seat without complaint. Park Yuna sat beside him, already scanning her data tablet for the day's agenda. The session began with trade disputes. Then came territorial negotiations. Kim Do-yeon listened carefully, but said nothing. He rarely spoke during these meetings. Some delegates had joked that humanity's representative was either mute or asleep. Then came the moment Park Yuna had been dreading. The Valorian delegate rose from his seat. He was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and skin like polished bronze. His name was impossible for human throats to pronounce, so everyone simply called him the Valorian. He was old, powerful, and had spent decades making sure everyone knew it. "Before we end today's session," the Valorian said, his voice booming through the chamber, "I wish to address a concern." The hall grew quiet. When a Valorian spoke, others listened. Their empire was vast, their military unmatched. Even the ancient species treated them with respect. "We have among us," the Valorian continued, "a species that has contributed nothing to this council in 50 years. They have no great fleet. They have no advanced technology. Their lifespans are laughably short. And yet they sit here, taking a seat that could belong to a worthier species." He turned his 4 eyes toward the human section. I speak, of course, of the humans. Whispers spread through the chamber. Some delegates looked at the human section with pity. Others looked away in embarrassment. Park Yuna's hands tightened on her tablet. She could feel her face growing hot with anger. She wanted to stand up, to shout, to defend her people. But she knew the rules. Only the ambassador could speak for humanity. She looked at Kim Do-yeon. He was still smiling. "They are vermin," the Valorian said, warming to his speech. "Short-lived vermin who breed quickly and die quickly and leave nothing behind. They have no psychic abilities, no natural weapons, no special senses. They are quite simply the weakest species ever admitted to this council." Spread his forearms wide. "I propose we remove their voting rights until they can prove they deserve to be here." The chamber erupted in debate. Some species agreed with the Valorian. Others argued that all admitted species had equal rights. A few simply watched the human section. curious to see how they would respond. Kim Do-yeon raised his hand. The hall fell silent. In 50 years, the human ambassador had almost never requested to speak. This was new. This was interesting. The chair recognizes the human delegate. The council's ancient speaker announced. Kim Do-yeon stood slowly. He looked small against the vast chamber, a single ordinary man surrounded by giants and monsters and beings of pure energy. I thank the honorable Valorian delegate for his perspective, Kim Do-yeon said. His voice was soft but clear, carried by the translation systems to every ear in the room. It is always valuable to hear how others see us. The Valorian frowned. He had expected anger. He had expected pleading. He had not expected thanks. Humanity is indeed young, Kim Do-yeon continued. We are indeed short-lived. We have no great powers, no ancient wisdom, no vast fleets. These things are true. Park Yuna closed her eyes. This was not the defense she had hoped for. But I would ask the council to remember one thing, Kim Do-yeon said. We are still learning. We are still growing. And we are very, very patient. He bowed his head slightly. I have nothing more to say. He sat down. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then the debates resumed, louder than before. The Valorian's proposal was eventually tabled for further discussion, neither approved nor rejected. As they left the hall, Park Yuna walked beside her ambassador in frustrated silence. Why? She finally asked, why did you not defend us? Why did you not show them what we can do? Kim Do-yeon stopped walking. He turned to look at her, and for just a moment she saw something in his eyes. Something old. Something patient. Something that made her feel very young. The loudest voice in the room, he said quietly, is rarely the most dangerous one. Before she could respond, an alarm began to sound. Red lights flashed along the corridor walls. A voice echoed through the station's speakers, speaking in the universal emergency language. Distress signal received. Category Omega. The Devourer Swarm has attacked the Kethra system. All council members report to emergency session immediately. Kim Do-yeon's smile faded. He looked toward the assembly hall, then back at Park Yuna. It seems, he said softly, that patience may be running out. The emergency session began within the hour. Every delegate rushed to the Grand Assembly Hall, their earlier arguments forgotten. The Devourer Swarm was not a political issue. It was a survival issue. Kim Do-yeon sat in his usual seat, watching the chaos unfold around him. Park Yuna was beside him, her face pale as she read the reports coming through her tablet. 3 colony worlds destroyed, she whispered. 17 million dead. The swarm consumed everything. Buildings, ships, people. Kim Do-yeon nodded slowly. He had read about the swarm in the historical archives. They were ancient, older than most civilizations in the galaxy. They did not negotiate. They did not stop. They simply ate, growing larger with each world they consumed. The council speaker called for order, and the chamber fell into tense silence. We have received confirmation, the speaker announced. The Devourer Swarm has returned. They are moving toward the inner systems. At their current speed, they will reach populated space within 3 cycles. The chamber exploded with voices. Fear, anger, blame. Everyone spoke at once, and no one listened. The Valorian delegate stood, and his presence alone silenced the others. The Valorian Empire will not run, he declared. We will meet this threat with steel and fire. Our fleet is already mobilizing. He looked around the chamber, his 4 eyes challenging anyone to match his bravery. Who will stand with us? Silence. The other species looked at each other, then at the floor. The Crystalline Collective claimed their ships were not designed for war. The Mindweavers said they needed time to prepare their psychic defenses. The Trade Federation argued that fighting was pointless, and evacuation was the only option. One by one, they made excuses. One by one, they stepped back. The Valorian's face twisted with disgust. Cowards. All of you. His eyes moved to the human section. And what of humanity? Will you also hide? Or do you even have ships worth mentioning? Laughter spread through the chamber. Nervous laughter, but laughter still. Everyone knew humanity's fleet was small. 200 ships, maybe less. Patrol vessels and cargo transports, nothing that could face the swarm. Park Yuna felt her anger rising again. She looked at her ambassador, expecting the same calm smile. But Kim Do-yeon was not smiling. He stood slowly. And something about his movement made the laughter fade. Perhaps it was the way he held himself. Perhaps it was the look in his eyes. For the first time in 50 years, the human ambassador looked like something other than a quiet old man. "Humanity will respond," he said. The Valorian tilted his head. "With what? Your toy boats? With what is necessary?" Kim Do-yeon looked across the chamber, meeting the eyes of species that had ignored humanity for decades. "We will deploy a response force to the Kethra system. We ask only that the Council not interfere with our operations." More confused murmurs. The Valorian laughed openly. "You ask us not to interfere? What is there to interfere with? Your 200 ships will be consumed in minutes." "Perhaps," Kim Do-yeon said. "But we will respond nonetheless." He sat down. The session continued, but Park Yuna barely heard it. She leaned close to her ambassador. "What are you doing?" "We don't have the ships. We don't have the weapons. This is suicide." Kim Do-yeon did not answer. In the back of the chamber, an ancient being watched with great interest. Counselor Threnvex was one of the oldest creatures in the known galaxy. His species had been among the first to achieve space travel. They possessed psychic abilities that most races could not understand. He had lived for thousands of years, and in that time, he'd learned to read minds as easily as others read books. Something about the human ambassador had caught his attention. A feeling. A shadow of something hidden. Threnvex reached out with his mind, gently touching the surface of Kim Do-yeon's thoughts, and then he pulled back. Gasping, the delegates nearby turned to look at him. A mindweaver showing shock was rare. A mindweaver showing fear was almost unheard of. "Counselor?" Someone asked. "What is wrong?" Threnvex's ancient eyes fixed on the human ambassador. Kim Do-yeon did not look back, but somehow Threnvex knew the human was aware of what had just happened. "Nothing," Threnvex said slowly. "Nothing at all." But his hands were shaking. After the session ended, Kim Do-yeon returned to the human embassy. It was a small section of the station, modest compared to the grand halls of other species. But it was home, and right now. It was the center of something much larger. Lee Juye was waiting for them. She was the military liaison to the council. A woman with cold eyes and a soldier's posture. She had served in 3 border conflicts before taking this position, and she did not waste time with pleasantries. "Ambassador," she said, holding out a data tablet. "I received your message. Protocol revelation is ready for authorization." Park Yuna frowned. "Protocol what?" Kim Do-yeon took the tablet. His thumb hovered over the authorization screen. "Before I sign this, I want to be clear. Once we do this, there is no going back. The galaxy will know. Everything changes." Lee Ji-ye nodded. "Understood, sir. But if not now, when? If we let the swarm destroy those worlds while we hide our strength, what does that say about us?" Kim Do-yeon was quiet for a long moment. He looked at Park Yuna, then at the small window that showed the stars beyond. "Yuna," he said softly, "do you know why humanity was admitted to the council 50 years ago?" She shook her head. "Because we asked nicely." "Because we seemed harmless?" "Because they looked at us and saw nothing worth fearing." He pressed his thumb to the tablet, authorizing the protocol. "They were right to admit us. But they were wrong about why." The tablet beeped. Authorization confirmed. Lee Juye allowed herself a small smile. "I'll notify the fleet." Park Yuna stepped forward. "What fleet?" "What is protocol revelation?" "What have you been hiding?" Kim Do-yeon turned to face her fully. For the first time since she had known him, he looked tired. Not weak, but tired, like a man who had been carrying a heavy weight for a very long time. 50 years ago, when humanity joined the council, we made a decision. We could show the galaxy our true strength and become a target. Or we could appear weak, be ignored, and use that time to prepare. Prepare for what? For a day like today? For a moment when the galaxy needed us, and we could answer? He moved toward the door. Come with me. It's time you understood what humanity has been doing while the galaxy wasn't watching. Park Yuna followed, her heart pounding. Behind them, Li Gia began making calls, her voice calm and efficient. The stars outside continued to burn, indifferent to the small dramas of the species below. But somewhere in the darkness, something was waking up. Something that had been hidden for 50 years. Humanity was about to show its true face. The Council sent observation drones to watch humanity's response. They expected a small show of force, perhaps a brave but doomed gesture. Some delegates even placed bets on how quickly the human ships would be destroyed. The drones arrived at the rendezvous point and began transmitting. In the Grand Assembly Hall, every screen flickered to life. Delegates gathered around, curious to see what the foolish humans would do. At first, there was nothing. Empty space, stars, silence. Then the fold space gates opened. It started with a dozen points of light, ships emerging from faster-than-light travel. Then 100, then 1,000. The light became so bright that the drone cameras had to adjust, filtering the glare. When the light faded, the assembly hall was silent. 15,000 warships hung in space where there had been nothing. Dreadnoughts larger than anything the galaxy had seen. Carriers filled with thousands of smaller craft, destroyers, cruisers, frigates, and support vessels stretching across the void in perfect formation. The Valorian delegate dropped his drinking vessel. It shattered on the floor, but he did not notice. That is not possible, someone whispered. Humans only have 200 ships. Our intelligence confirmed it. But the drones kept transmitting. The numbers kept climbing. 15,000 became 18,000 as more ships continued to arrive from hidden locations across the galaxy. Kim Do-yeon stood in the human embassy, watching the same feed with Park Yuna and Li Juye. Park Yuna's hand covered her mouth. Tears were forming in her eyes, though she did not know if they were from shock or pride or something else entirely. How? She breathed. How did we hide this? Li Jie answered, her voice calm and professional. Asteroid fields, gas giant moons, dead systems that no one visited. We built shipyards in places the galaxy forgot about, and we built slowly, quietly, for 50 years. On the feed, the flagship of the human fleet moved to the front of the formation. It was called the Persistence, and it was the largest ship humanity had ever constructed. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, designed to be invisible against the void. From the flagship, a transmission began broadcasting on all frequencies. Admiral Choi Min-ho's face appeared on every screen in the assembly hall. He was an older man, perhaps the same age as Ambassador Kim, but his face was marked with scars and his eyes were hard. He had spent his life preparing for this moment. This is Admiral Choi Min-ho of the United Human Fleet, he said. We are responding to the emergency in the Kethra system. All Devourer's swarm forces are ordered to withdraw immediately. Failure to comply will result in their complete destruction. He paused, letting his words sink in. Humanity honors its debts, he continued. Humanity keeps its promises. The swarm ends today. Transmission ended. In the assembly hall, chaos erupted. Delegates shouted questions at each other. Some accused others of knowing about the hidden fleet. Some demanded answers from the human section, but Kim Do-yeon was not there to answer. He remained in the embassy. Watching the screens, a new figure appeared on one of the feeds. Han Soo-jin, chief engineer of the Persistence. She was younger than the others, perhaps 40, with short hair and grease stains on her uniform. She was giving a tour to an alien observer who had somehow been allowed aboard. You see, Han Soo-jin explained, pointing at a technical display, humans are not actually weak. We just prefer not to show our strength unless necessary. The alien observer, a small creature from the Trade Federation, seemed confused. But why? Why hide for 50 years? You could have had power, influence, respect. Han Soo-jin smiled. Respect earned through fear is not real respect. We wanted the galaxy to judge us by our actions, not our weapons. She gestured at the massive engineering bay around them. Besides, power revealed is power limited. Once your enemies know what you can do, they prepare for it. We preferred to be underestimated. Back in the assembly hall, Counselor Threnvex finally spoke. His ancient voice cut through the noise, silencing the other delegates. I understand now, he said slowly. I understand what I sensed in the human ambassador's mind. Everyone turned to look at him. When I reached into his thoughts, I expected to find fear, anger, perhaps arrogance. Threnvex shook his head. Instead, I found patience. Deep, calculated, generational patience. The kind of patience that builds fleets in secret for 50 years. The kind of patience that endures insults and mockery without complaint. The kind of patience that waits for exactly the right moment to reveal itself. He looked directly at the screen showing the human fleet. They were never weak, he said. They were never afraid. They were waiting. Waiting for a moment when the galaxy would need them, so that when they finally showed their strength, it would be to save others rather than to conquer. The assembly hall was silent. On the screens, the human fleet began to move. 18,000 ships, more firepower than most species had seen in their entire history, all heading toward the Kethra system. The Valorian delegate found his voice at last. Why? He asked, and for the first time, there was no mockery in his tone. Why would you hide such power? Why would you let us insult you when you could have crushed us at any time? It was a question that would be debated for centuries. But for now, the answer was simple. Somewhere in the darkness of space, the Devourer swarm was approaching populated worlds. Millions of lives hung in the balance, and humanity, the species everyone had dismissed as weak and worthless, was racing to save them. Not for glory, not for power, not for revenge, simply because it was the right thing to do. Admiral Choi Min-ho stood on the bridge of the Persistence, watching the star. As Streak passed as his fleet accelerated toward battle, behind him, his crew worked in focused silence. Admiral, his communications officer, said, "We're receiving messages from the Valorian fleet. They want to coordinate with us." Choi Min-ho allowed himself a small smile. "Tell them we welcome their support. Give them our battle plans and frequency codes, sir. After everything they said about us." The Admiral turned to look at his officer. "Today, we are not fighting for pride. We are not fighting to prove ourselves. We are fighting because people are dying and we can help." He looked back at the stars. "There will be time for politics later. Right now, there is only the mission." The fleet continued forward, toward the sound of screaming and the shadow of death. Humanity had been hiding for 50 years now. At last they were awake. The Battle of Kethra system began at dawn, or what passed for dawn in the endless darkness of space. The Devourer swarm had already consumed 2 of the systems. Outer planets. Their forces numbered in the millions. Living ships made of organic matter, each one a beast designed only to eat and reproduce. They moved like a cloud of locusts, darkening the stars wherever they passed. Admiral Choi Min-ho stood on the bridge of the Persistence, watching the enemy approach. His tactical displays showed the numbers clearly. The swarm outnumbered them 3-1, perhaps more. In any normal battle, those odds would mean death. But this was not a normal battle. "All ships," Choi Min-ho said calmly. "Engage." The human fleet split into dozens of smaller groups, each one moving with perfect coordination. They had trained for this moment for decades, running simulations, planning strategies, preparing for an enemy they hoped they would never have to face. Now, the simulations became reality. In the assembly hall, far from the battle, delegates watched in stunned silence. The observation drones transmitted everything: the flash of weapons, the explosion of ships, the dance of death that unfolded across thousands of kilometers. Park Yuna was not watching from the safety of the station. She had insisted on joining the refugee operations, helping to evacuate civilians from the planets that were still under threat. Now she stood in the command center of a transport ship, directing evacuation shuttles while the battle raged around them. Shuttle 7. "You have swarm fighters approaching from Sector 12, she said into her communicator. Change course to heading 330. Confirmed, came the reply. But we still have civilians waiting at the landing zone. I know. We'll send another shuttle. Just get those people out of there. She worked without rest, her voice growing hoarse from constant communication. Around her, human and alien crew members worked side by side, united by the simple goal of saving as many lives as possible. Outside, the battle continued. The swarm was relentless. For every ship the humans destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. The human fleet took losses too. Good ships. Good people. Names that would be carved into monuments back on Earth. But they did not retreat. They did not break. They simply kept fighting. Then something unexpected happened. A Valorian transport ship, carrying thousands of civilians, lost its engines. It drifted helplessly in space, directly in the path of a swarm cruiser. The alien vessel was already opening its massive jaws, preparing to consume the transport and everyone inside. A human destroyer, the Unconquered, changed course to intercept. On the bridge of the Unconquered, Captain Beek Ji-soo made a quick calculation. There was no way to destroy the swarm cruiser in time, but there was another option. All crew to escape pods, she ordered. I'm taking the ship in alone. Captain, that's an order. Those are 15,000 civilians. We're one ship. The math is simple. The crew obeyed, though many of them wept as they fled. Within minutes, Captain Beek was alone on the bridge. She aimed the Unconquered directly at the swarm cruiser and accelerated to maximum speed. The impact was visible from across the system. The Unconquered struck the cruiser at full velocity, and both ships exploded in a ball of fire and debris. The Valorian transport, saved by the sacrifice of a single human captain, continued its escape. In the assembly hall, the Valorian delegate watched the footage in silence. Tears ran down his bronze face. She died for us, he whispered. A human died for Valorian lives. Similar scenes played out across the battlefield. Human ships placed themselves between the swarm and civilian transports. Human pilots flew into the heart of the enemy formation to create openings for others to escape. Human soldiers held defensive positions until the last evacuation shuttle could launch, knowing they would not survive. Admiral Choi Min-ho's flagship, the Persistence, took a direct hit from a swarm dreadnought. The massive ship began to break apart, its hull cracking under the pressure. Abandon ship, Choi Min-ho ordered. All hands, abandon ship. He was the last to leave, riding an escape pod into the chaos of battle. But he did not stop commanding. From his tiny pod, using only a basic communication system, he continued to coordinate the fleet. 3rd Division, cover the evacuation route. 5th Division, push into Sector 7. We're not done yet. His officers obeyed, amazed that their admiral was still giving orders while drifting in a metal box barely larger than a coffin on the Persistence. Before it was destroyed completely, Han Soo-jin activated her final creation. She had spent 10 years designing it, a gravitic pulse, weapon that could disrupt the swarm's hive mind connection. She typed in the activation codes as the ship shook around her. Panels fell from the ceiling. Fires burned in the corridors. She had maybe 30 seconds before the reactor exploded. This better work, she muttered, pressing the final button. The pulse spread outward like a wave of invisible force. When it hit the swarm, the effect was immediate. The living ships, which had moved with perfect coordination moments before, suddenly became confused. They crashed into each other. They fired on their own allies. The hive mind that connected them was broken. Han Soo-jin smiled as the escape pod launched her into space, carrying her away from the dying ship. It worked, she said to no one. It actually worked. The battle turned. With their coordination destroyed, the swarm became vulnerable. The human fleet pressed the advantage, supported by the Valorian ships that had finally arrived to help, for the first time in recorded history. The Devourer swarm retreated in the assembly hall. Delegates watched in disbelief as the enemy fled. The swarm, which had consumed 1,000 worlds, was running from the species they had once called vermin. Kim Do-yeon stood at the window of the human embassy. watching the distant lights of battle fade. Park Yuna's voice came through his communicator, tired but triumphant. Ambassador, the evacuation is complete. We saved over 3 million civilians, and our losses. A pause. Significant. We won't know the full count for days. Kim Do-yen closed his eyes. Victory always came with a price. He had known this would happen. He had known good people would die, but they had died for something. They had died protecting strangers, defending people who had mocked them, saving lives that had nothing to do with humanity's interests. That was what made them human. The Valorian delegate found him an hour later. The massive warrior stood in the doorway of the embassy, looking smaller than Kim Do-yen had ever seen him. I came to apologize, the Valorian said quietly. For everything. Kim Do-yen gestured to a chair. Sit, please. The Valorian sat, his forearms hanging loosely at his sides. I called your people vermin. I said you contributed nothing. And then I watched her captain give her life for Valorian civilians she had never met. He shook his head. I have lived for 300 years. I have seen many things, but I have never seen anything like that. Kim Do-yen was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice soft. We do not fight because we hate what is in front of us. We fight because we love what is behind us. The Valorian looked up. What does that mean? It means that for humans, protecting others is not a choice. It is who we are. Kim Do-yen looked toward the stars. We are weak. We are short-lived. We have no great powers, but we will always, always fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. Outside, the stars continued to burn. Somewhere in the darkness, the swarm was regrouping, licking its wounds, trying to understand what had just happened. And somewhere else, a message was being prepared. A message from the Swarm Queen herself. She wanted to meet the human. Ambassador. She wanted to understand. The neutral station floated at the edge of swarm territory, far from any inhabited world. It was ancient, built by a species that had died out long before humanity discovered fire. Now it served as a meeting place for those who had no other option. Kim Do-yen walked through the empty corridors alone. The station's lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows on the metal walls. Behind him, at the entrance, Park Yuna and Lee Ju-ye waited with a security team. He had ordered them to stay. This meeting, he had insisted, could only happen one way. He entered the central chamber and stopped. The Swarm Queen was waiting for him. She was vast. Her body filled most of the chamber, a mountain of organic matter that pool. Said and shifted with each breath. Thousands of eyes covered her surface, all of them fixed on the small human who had just entered. Tendrils longer than starships hung from her form, each one capable of crushing him without effort. She was ancient. She had lived for millions of years, consuming civilizations, absorbing the memories and knowledge of every species she had destroyed. In all that time, she had never requested a meeting with prey, until now. Kim Do-yen bowed politely. Thank you for agreeing to meet. The Queen's voice came from everywhere at once, a vibration that he felt in his bones more than heard with his ears. I did not agree. I demanded. There is a difference, of course. Silence stretched between them. The Queen's many eyes studied him, searching for something. You are small, she said finally. Fragile. Your life is a spark compared to mine. And yet you stood against the swarm. You broke our connection. You made us flee. The tendrils shifted, agitated. I have consumed 10,000 species. None of them ever made us flee. Kim Do-yen said nothing. He simply waited. I want to understand, the Queen continued. What are you? What makes humans different? It was the question he had expected. The question, perhaps, that the entire galaxy had been asking since the battle ended. Kim Do-yen took a deep breath. When he spoke, his voice was calm and clear. We are the species that buries its dead and remembers their names. The Queen's eyes narrowed. We are the species that teaches its children the mistakes of its ancestors, so that each generation might do better than the last. We are the species that looks at the stars and feels both wonder and responsibility. He stepped forward, and the Queen's tendrils did not stop him. We are the species that write stories about heroes. Not because we are heroes ourselves, but because we want to be. We are the species that believes tomorrow can be better than today, even when all evidence says otherwise. He stopped, standing directly beneath the Queen's massive form. A single tendril could kill him in an instant. He did not look afraid. We are humanity. The Queen was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, almost confused. I expected to break you. That is what the swarm does. We find the fear in our prey, and we use it to destroy their will to fight. But your captain flew her ship into our cruiser rather than let innocents die. Your admiral commanded his fleet from an escape pod. Your soldiers held their ground knowing they would not survive. She leaned closer, her countless eyes searching his face. Where is your fear? Where is the weakness I can exploit? Kim Do-yeon smiled softly. We are afraid. We are always afraid. But for humans, fear is not a reason to stop. It is a reminder of what we have to lose. The Queen pulled back. For the first time in her ancient existence, she did not know what to do. I could kill you now, she said. I could end your species in a single generation. You know this, yes. And yet you came here alone, unarmed, unafraid, not unafraid, but willing. The tendrils shifted again. The Queen seemed to be thinking, processing, trying to fit this small creature into her understanding of the universe. I have consumed species that were faster than you, stronger, smarter, more advanced in every way. They all fell because in the end, they could not face the inevitability of death. They ran, they begged, they surrendered. She paused. You are different. You know you will die, and you charge forward anyway. You know you cannot win, and you fight harder. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. A species that would die to protect strangers is not one the swarm can consume. You would poison us with your defiance. Kim Do-yeon remained silent, waiting. I offer a truce, the Queen said finally. Not because I fear your weapons. Not because your fleet can destroy me. But because I have looked into your nature, and I have seen something I cannot defeat. She reached out with a single tendril, not to attack, but to touch his shoulder gently. It was the first peaceful contact the swarm had ever made with another species. Hope, she said. That is your true weapon. The stubborn, irrational belief that things can be better. I have lived for millions of years, and I have never encountered anything so dangerous. The truce was signed. The swarm withdrew to their own territory. For the first time in galactic history, the devourer had been stopped, not by force, but by something deeper. Kim Do-yeon returned to the council. The assembly hall was packed when he arrived. Every species, every delegate, every observer who could find space had come to witness this moment. As he walked to the human section, something unprecedented happened. The delegates rose. All of them. Even the species who had mocked humanity for decades. Even the Valorians. They stood in silence as the quiet ambassador took his place. Counselor Threnvex approached the central platform. His ancient voice carried through the chamber. In recognition of humanity's actions in the Battle of Kethra, and in recognition of the unprecedented peace achieved with the Devourer Swarm, I formally propose that humanity be elevated to senior council status. All rights, privileges, and responsibilities of that rank would be granted immediately. The vote was unanimous, but when the speaker turned to Kim Do-yeon for his acceptance, the ambassador slowly shook his head. We are honored by this recognition, he said. Truly honored, but we must decline. Shocked whispers spread through the chamber. We did not fight for power, Kim Do-yeon continued. We did not save lives for political advantage. We did not reveal our fleet to gain status. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of species who had once dismissed his people as vermin. We did these things because they were right. Because someone needed help, and we could provide it. He stood a little straighter. Humanity does not seek power over others. We never did. We only wanted a seat at the table and friends to share it with. The chamber was silent then, Slowly, the Valorian delegate began to clap. Others joined him. The applause grew until it filled the entire hall. A thunder of respect from a galaxy that had finally understood what humans truly were. Later, on the observation deck, Park Yuna found her ambassador looking at the stars. She stood beside him in comfortable silence. "You turned down the highest honor in the galaxy," she said eventually. "Most people would think you're crazy." Kim Do-yeon smiled. "Most people would be right. Can I ask you something?" "Of course." She hesitated. "What is humanity's true power? Not the fleet, not the weapons. What made even the Swarm Queen afraid?" Kim Do-yeon was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. Endurance. The ability to keep going when everything says we should stop. Compassion. The need to help others, even strangers, even enemies. And stubbornness? He smiled. The absolute refusal to give up hope, even when hope makes no sense. He turned to look at her. That is what makes us human. Not our technology, not our strength. Just the simple, stubborn belief that tomorrow can be better than today and the willingness to fight for it. Park Yuna looked at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Swarm Queen was keeping her promise. Somewhere out there, species who had once feared humanity were now reaching out in friendship. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was changing because a quiet ambassador had refused to accept that his people were worthless. "Do you think they'll remember us?" she asked. "In 1,000 years, when we're all gone, will anyone remember what we did?" Kim Do-yeon nodded slowly. "They will remember. Not because we were the strongest or the smartest or the most powerful, but because when the galaxy needed someone to stand up, we did not hesitate." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "That is our legacy. That is our gift to the future. The simple truth that ordinary people, working together, can do extraordinary things." The stars continued to burn, as they always had and always would. But for the species who lived beneath them, something had changed. A small, short-lived race from an unremarkable planet had shown them a different way to exist, not through conquest, not through fear, but through hope, compassion, and the stubborn refusal to ever give up. Humanity had revealed its true power, and the galaxy would never be the same.